So Hope, is the audio, I don't hear any audio right now.
I have it muted.
Okay. I heard through the door.
Steve, I unmuted you if you just want to mute yourself on your.
Well, no, that's not true. I'm pretty much straight through Thanksgiving.
Tina, can you hear me?
It's kind of crappy. It's good with that one. Okay,
But just to let you know, Mr. Tarpley, we're just trying to check the audio. We have 2 new devices that we're working through. And once we get those confirmed, we'll be starting the meeting here shortly, okay?
Who are we waiting on in person?
I hope you're on mute. Tina,
So
can
we're
you
waiting
hear
on
me?
Brent Fulcher, Randy Proctor, David Mintz.
Is David going to be in person?
Yeah.
And Raleigh, right?
He said he was coming in person.
Tina said she's not hearing.
I'm not hearing anything through the audio.
Go in your audio.
Actually,
Hit the test.
if I log into the webinar, at least I can figure.
Or you know what? Switch it to that other one. And then switch the top one to the other one too.
I don't even have any documents open now, so I just may keep it closed.
And you can see it right there too.
Tina, can you hear us now?
If
Nope.
we have that
I can hear through the door.
oh, good.
I'm going to go out and come back in because there might be a reset because where that speaker was in this computer, just to make sure it wasn't messing with my audio. I'll be right back.
The test tape just came through.
Yeah, it might be her.
Okay, I think we should go at least 5 minutes.
Mr. Tarpley, are you able to hear us?
Yes, you're coming through fine.
Give it 10.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Tina, can you hear us?
I can't hear anything. Damn it.
I'm confused while you're talking.
She's testing her audio.
Do the other one too.
Officially reporting.
Yeah.
Give it a few minutes.
Hope, how early we're supposed to show up
8.
here?
Brent Fulcher, Randy Proctor, and David Mintz. And then Mike Blanton and Scott Whitley on WebEx.
Who's online? So we got Mr. Tarpley. Staff. Who are we waiting? Okay.
Mike and Scott. It's kind of like this last night. Everybody was party.
Weather was nice.
Hey Jeff, it's Hope. I just want to check your audio. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. Yes, sir. Thank you. We'll get started in just a few minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go into your family,
Invite,
go into Chuck Winity.
Welcome. Six oh three.
You don't technically.
I know, but still.
To approve the minutes, they do.
Just
That-
we'll get.
But that could just be done the next meeting if you didn't have one. Yeah.
You know, we got several people
You
coming. Brent's always, he's usually one of those.
Have Bill and Jeff online.
And so we should put- there's two up there.
Oh, you have two now.
Yeah, there's two. Jeff is on there.
Cool, awesome. We're gonna give it a few more minutes to see if anybody else shows up.
Oh, who's in attendees?
Is Steve Poland on his phone?
Oh, okay. I just knew you had somebody in attendance.
Yeah. We got 8 people. I said I'd do at least 6:05, so we'll give it a couple more minutes, see if anybody shows up. What about Mike? Is my vice chair gonna be here?
Who's gonna call in, I think.
Yep. I can shoot him a text.
I am more today.
Oh, you were Laura?
Well, then they'll never.
No, you won't.
She had.
Should have put her picture on a stick and like just set it here.
She should have pre-recorded, that's what I think.
Well, that's what I told her. If you didn't get her notes, I was just gonna play the YouTube video from Tuesday's meeting. She was in Raleigh with Sean doing stuff today.
Oh, I got you. Well, that's part of her job.
She's been in a vehicle a lot this week.
Yes.
Actually, just before you arrived, she called me and asked how to use the gas card.
I was thinking on this week. You'll call all week.
Last time, it's on the screen for all the other ones. I can make it down here for this one.
Where are you out of town?
I'm in Raleigh.
Yesterday it went easy. Today it was giving her.
State of North Carolina. Was it?
Start. All right, everybody. My name is Tom Roller. Sea Commissioner. I chair the Finfish Standing Advisory Committee, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. First order of business, we're going to vote on the approval of the agenda. If anyone has any modifications or changes they would like to propose. If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion, second. Can we do a vote by?
Consensus.
Okay, so vote right. Is anybody opposed to this motion? In opposition, I call the agenda approved. That motion passes. Second order of business is vote on the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was March 17th, 2022. Does anybody have any changes they would like to propose or make if everyone's seen the minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any opposition to this motion? Seeing none, motion. Order of business is a Marine Fisheries Commission update from.
Couldn't be here. I'll give an update of recent activity, since your last meeting. Y'all last met in March, and we've had 2 commission meetings, one in May and one in August. Since then, first of all, welcome our new commissioners. I know Sarah's here. She'll be a new commissioner coming up soon. I guess be sworn in. Is she sworn in today?
She was sworn in before this
She
meeting.
is. Congratulations. Right. So she's recently sworn in. So we have 4 new commissioners. Doug Rader is now our scientist seat. He replaced Pete Carnegie as the scientist. Anna Shellum now holds a commercial seat. That was previously held by Sam Romano. Donald Huggins was sworn in as an at-large member, and that was in the seat that was held by Tom Hendrickson. And let's see, and here tonight we have Sarah Gardner. And she is an at-large member, and she replaced Dr. Martin Posey. Just to let you guys know, the AC appointment period opened in mid-September. So we are taking applications for all the advisory committees through November 1st. So if you know anybody's interested, certainly let them know to put in an application. I think they can contact Laura's office to do that. Those of you on this committee and your term is ending, I know we have 1 or 2. You'll need to reapply if you're interested in being reappointed, and that would be up to the chairman of the commission. So we'll contact you to let you know if your term is running out, to those of you who are. And if you do, you still need to submit an application, and you can contact Laura if you have any questions about that. The final decisions on new appointments will be made on by December 1st, or released by December 1st. The 2 MFC meetings, as I mentioned before, I'm going to cover highlights of those. That was for May and August. So the first of those, and some of these are species related, and Corinne's going to cover some of the state species in her update, but I'll just touch on some of them. So for river herring, we approved the river herring F&P as an information update. This means there's no changes in management at this time. There's currently an ASMSC stock assessment that's underway. And once that is completed, we'll be giving you an update when that comes out. Southern Flounder, most of you are probably aware of the management that's been going on with that. The commission gave final approval to the Southern Flounder FMP Amendment 3. Corinne will go over the implementation of management measures that were approved as part of that amendment. Striped mullet, which we'll talk about a little bit tonight. During the May meeting, the commission was presented with a stock assessment report on striped mullet. Corinne, and it does indicate that they're overfished, with overfishing occurring. And Corinne's going to cover some of the scoping. And as I said, we have a species lead for mullet here to answer questions and for you guys to provide some feedback on. In November, the commission will hear the results of the scoping period, and they will review and vote on the goals and objectives of Amendment 2 to the striped mullet plan. Striped bass, the commission selected their preferred management measure options for striped bass Amendment 2. As you're aware, the gillnet issue for the CSMA has dominated a lot of the conversation around this amendment. But there are a lot of other management options. Corinne will talk about a little bit. Estuarine striped bass Amendment 2 that was tabled at the last commission meeting, and that will come back up for approval or for a vote for approval at the November meeting. Spotted sea trout, there will be a stock assessment presentation that will be going out to at the upcoming commission meeting, right? So that's the update on that. And let's see, other issues. In May, the division received an informational update on blue catfish in the Albacore Sound. Following discussion with the commission, and the division is continuing to work on the blue catfish issue. And we expect to come back to the commission at some point in the near future for more discussion on this specifically, with the goal of developing some recommendations on dealing with this species in the near future. Janelle, one of our biologists, who was our catfish lead, she recently left the division for another position, but we're still moving forward with that. We haven't quite set a date for which commission meeting will come back yet. The commission requested that division draft a letter to the South Atlantic Council addressing the dolphin issue. This was in response to continuing discussion at the council regarding the bag limit reductions for the dolphin fishery. And that letter will go to the South Atlantic Council at their December meeting. And just for a little bit of background, I think Florida was pushing for some regulatory changes and North Carolina didn't feel like, I guess they were trying to squeeze the bag limit down a little bit and we didn't feel like those were necessary. So they asked for a letter to be written and sent to the council with regard to that for North Carolina's interest in that fishery.
And if anybody has any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah.
If I just maybe address this, I had talked to Laura a while back. This is somewhat trivial, but if perhaps that we can get a resume, a brief resume of commission members. And I don't know whether she's made any efforts to follow up on that. But I don't know whether it's even appropriate that we maybe ask for, get brief resumes for all members of the advisory committees. It would be nice to know who we're dealing with. And I don't know whether that's something that anybody else is interested in but myself, but particularly for the Marine Fish Commission.
Could you be a little bit more specific, Alan?
Just a real brief resume.
For every advisor?
Yeah, like I retired from so-and-so, I graduated from so-and-so, or I'm a commercial fisherman, I fish for so-and-so, or I'm a recreational angler and this, or doesn't have to be specific, but just something that, so for example, we have an idea what the commission members, what their background is perhaps. I mean, just a, brief, not, just not controversial.
No, understood.
Yeah.
To source it out, you're saying you
like
got it, you want to you commission, but as well as advisory.
that, if that's appropriate, I mean,
Yeah, we can take that.
No, we-
forward.
we
That's
did
fair.
that when we were on the commission. We made a brief resume to hand in, so. Just a suggestion. I made that to Laura and I don't know whether.
You look at the councils.
Right, that's correct.
Which is a different hearing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, a few more updates. The division is updating a 2017 white paper on false albacore. This came with our last commission meeting, requested. And this is to include any framing potential management options, just for future consideration to see where that fishery is headed. Yeah. Well, the 2017 paper is probably available, but the updated paper is not. And that'll be something that'll be coming back to the commission. So once it does, we can certainly provide you with a copy. The commission's November business meeting is scheduled November 16th to the 18th, and that'll be at the Islander Hotel in Emerald Isle. And so that completes the updates that Laura had put together. So if y'all have any questions with regard to that, I can certainly try, or me and Corinne and whoever else is in the room. So after that, I think I'm going to move right into annual AC planning. So you should have in front of you a MFC calendar. It's been put together here, and you'll see that the calendar. I think they also put like ASMSC, South Atlantic Council, Mid Atlantic Council meetings for the coming year. So it's very useful. Past few years, the ACs that you're on, like Finfish, Southern, the regional advisory committees, they've only pretty much met infrequently. And based on feedback, I think some of it came specifically from this committee and discussions with the director and the chairman. We are planning to have a full meeting schedule in 2023. This means that the ACs will meet 4 times in the upcoming year. So on the schedule, you'll see that you're supposed to meet in January, April, July, and October. Currently, we only have 1 action item tentatively planned for your review in 2023, and that will be actually the striped mullet plan coming back to you in October. So that's the current plan. That doesn't mean we won't have items for the other meetings, but that's the action item that's currently slated to come back at the moment. You have a question?
Yeah, so if we don't have any action items or agendas for the standing meeting, how will we handle this?
So, so the other meetings, we're likely to get, we're going to have updates from the commission activities, but they're also looking for opportunities to provide educational information to the committee. For example, coming up at your January meeting, they're planning to have somebody come in and talk to you guys about stock assessments and provide some more information. And certainly as we have commission meetings and other things, there is likely to be out there right now is to keep these on the big trout. Spotted sea trout will come around at some point. I'm not really sure. We'll probably go to the commission. Approve. Well, we'll have scoping at some point.
Yeah,
Sure.
so you'll hear about scoping in early 2023. So that's something that
She'll cover.
we'll go over during my talk a little bit. But those are kind of like we'll be talking mullet at today's meeting without an action item. We'll talk spotted sea trout likely at the May meeting. Not May, what's that one? June, October, April, the April one. Or around there.
Yeah, so the other important item, as far as your meeting schedule goes, right now we are planning, and this to help alleviate some of the travel stuff and the fact that we don't have heavy meeting items. January will probably be virtual. April will be in person, and then we'll alternate in person, virtual over the next year. So that'll give people a chance to just call in and not have to be, to drive a long distance to get to those meetings. The in-person meetings that we do have, we're going to keep the virtual option available for people. So if they don't want to drive a long distance, they can still call in. So for now, we're going to keep that option open, and that should alleviate maybe some of the stress of having to work and then come here and that sort of thing. So
We did have a couple people at the last two meetings that were concerned about not having great internet access and things. So now that the COVID order has been removed, open meeting laws say we do have to have a listening station available. So even if it is a fully virtual meeting, we'll always have a listening station. And so Laura will let you know if there is an option in person to come listen and participate in person, even if it's a full virtual meeting.
Yep.
So those are just,
Oh, no, that's
not the full business meetings, they would be.
we're just talking about the advisory committee, like Finfish right now. The the full MFC meetings will be in person. Of course, there's always an option for those to log in as well for public or anybody that wants to listen in. They string all of those. So having said all that, Laura was asking for any feedback people have on that plan as far as the virtual and in person with the option to call in, or, ideas that you guys might have as far as meeting up. I want to say this is the committee that kind of discussed more opportunities to provide feedback. So I think she's trying to address some of that concern that was expressed. You guys had expressed.
I think there was just a lot of frustration. Felt like we didn't do much during COVID, so we tried to figure that out. Anybody have any comments? Ideas on that?
Great. So not seeing any questions, and certainly if you do have comments or concerns, you can certainly reach out to me or reach out to Laura. Come to mind, and I'll pass it over to Corinne, if that's okay with the chair.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let her give her F&P updates.
just breezes along faster than Laura. Okay, so I'm going to go over our FMP items, our fisheries management plan, what's been going on for different species. Before I jump into our active plans, we had some requests for updates on southern flounder. So I'll start with that. And so Amendment 3 was adopted in May, and the division has implemented management. The 2022 season was based on the Amendment 3 management. The recreational season opened with a 1 fish bag limit for the month of September. And we will have full estimates. We will not have full estimates on the recreational season until that MRIP wave comes in, and that usually happens somewhere in late November. So it would likely happen after the commission meeting, even that we'll have estimates of the season. The commercial season began on September 15th. And throughout the recreational and commercial seasons, DMF staff were involved in the ongoings of and undertakings of this implementation, including our fisheries management group, our license and statistics, protected species, and marine patrol, just to name a few. We learned a lot throughout the 2022 season. It will be a few months before we have data available to tell the whole story of how the season went. The commercial season has not fully wrapped up yet. And so still have data coming in. And we heard a lot of positive comments from stakeholders on size and availability of fish. And we look forward to all that data so that we can give you updates in 2023 on that. Question.
What's still open?
The mobile gear is still open.
Still open?
Mhm.
You gotta make that more.
Central Pound Net's closest.
And Central Pound Net closes tomorrow.
How much quota's left?
I don't know.
Shock mobile gears is still
We're
open. Shock.
around 90%, I think.
Probably sometime next
Central
week.
Pound Net's coming in. That's not all in yet. That's one of the bigger allocations. And then Northern Mobiles seems to be clicking away a little bit.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of pound.
Little bit of drive.
What sort of stuff do you have available for fishermen to see what is still open other than through proclamation emails? Because I think a lot of people, because several people asked me about this, I assume mobile gears closed last Thursday at 6 a.m. or 6 p.m., whenever it was. That was the original.
We've closed it and then we've reopened it.
We reopened last week, right?
And then we left it open.
Okay,
It's not
yeah.
closed.
Been a lot of confusion.
We didn't have an expiration on this one. We just gonna leave it open as long as we can.
Mhm. Yeah, but that is a good point that perhaps there could be a way on our website or something that makes it a little bit more user-friendly than wading through those proclamations.
Yeah.
Because I know even staff at this point have also been like, what's happening?
What color on, turn it off.
Mhm.
We've been trying to put a news release out with the proclamations and that helps some, but not everybody sees the news releases either. So
But I get,
it's difficult. It's very fluid.
I guess it's hard though for people, like, it's nice to know it's open instead of wait for the proclamation to tell you it's closed.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a lot of the confusion is. I mean, Corinne, do you mind, does anybody have any questions on this before you?
Oh, no, I was gonna do
Jeff
questions
has
on
his hand up.
Flounder before we move on.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jeff. Buckle.
Hi, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks. I've seen a lot of 8-0 flounder, southern flounder and shallow water this summer and fall. And I was just curious if your fishery independent surveys see that statewide or if that's just a local phenomena. Have you seen any of the biologists that do the trawl survey? Are they commenting on the number of 8-0 southern flounder?
Yeah, so on Tuesday, Mike Leffler gave a little bit of an update on that and said that anecdotally, our survey data has been showing a lot of those age zeros and also having some indications of older fish as well. I think they're aging 2021 fish right now, and I think they aged a 7-year-old. So Mike said there's some good indications from independent surveys that things have been going well.
Great, thank you.
We had a fairly good response with our Carcass Collection and other efforts to get samples from recreational fishery, and we've also gotten quite a few from the commercial. So a lot of the data is obviously preliminary as far as our indices and stuff go, but seems that we've seen some positive signs at least.
Yeah, and if you're interested in that, you can give Mike or Ann a call. They're always willing to chat.
Call them all.
The program 915 index and the juvenile index, are they available to the public every year? For example, striped mullet was what, 2019. Now, could that index be published?
It is annually. So, in July, every year, we do a fisheries management plan review of all of our fisheries management plans for state and federal species that we're involved in. It is 700-page book that I put together with the biologists every year, and it is available on our website. And it reviews all of the indices we don't go into like the stock assessment part.
No, you couldn't do
but-
the stock
yeah,
assessment,
yeah,
but you could do the
the data.
index for the trawl survey for the juveniles and
all of-
915 for the adults.
So when you go online and you just Google like NCDMF stock overview or FMP update, it'll pull it up. And then when you go to that page, there is a big 700-page document you said, but just below that, there's a drop down for the different species. And if you just click on an individual species like striped mullet, it'll give you another drop down box and it'll have the the annual FMP update. And if you click on that, when you open it, it's maybe 10 or 15 pages long, and it'll have if there's a juvenile index, it'll have a juvenile index. If there's a electrofishing index, it'll have the electrofishing index. The 915 index will be in there. That any age or length data that we collect.
By species.
There's one report for each species we manage.
And that becomes, is that at the Marine Fish Commission meetings, is that reported by the director?
Every August, I get, Lee actually gives the majority of it, and, yep. And so, I could actually have Laura, let you all know where that is on our website if you would like. And then you have better access to finding it instead of wading through our website. So I'll make note to have Laura, provide that to you all.
Thank you.
So is there any other questions about flounder before we let Corinne do? There's always questions about flounder.
So that conversation actually moves into some part of what I was going to go into. As part of the annual review of our FMPs at each August meeting, along with our annual review document, we put out our 5-year schedule for the FMPs. This schedule is approved by the DEQ secretary annually. So this year we put together the 2022 through 2027 schedule, and the secretary approved that. And so the 2022, 2023 species, which are under review, include river herring, hard clam and oyster, estuarine striped bass, spotted sea trout, and striped mullet. Additionally, in 2023, the division plans to update the blue crab stock assessment as laid out in Amendment 3's adaptive management for that species. So going into blue crab a little bit more, that stock assessment update will include data through 2022. The terminal year of the benchmark assessment was 2016, and that indicated the stock was overfished and overfishing was occurring. And that is when we put in management through Amendment 3. The stock assessment update will have an additional 6 years of data. Depending on that management from Amendment 3, that'll be 2 or 3 years of data that include the management to address the stock status. Another item of interest that the Shellfish Crustacean Advisory Committee will hear more about in early 2023 is the list of approved diamondback terrapin birds. So our Amendment 3 established diamondback terrapin management areas, and in those areas during certain times of year you have to use excluder devices. We have been doing gear testing since 2021 on a modified funnel design, which was proposed by North Carolina Crabbers as an additional approved additional gear modification to add to that approved list. The division is currently reviewing the results of the field, the in-tank and field studies from that to see if this is a device that we would like to add to that approved list. And those results will come to the shellfish crustacean to verify that they are in agreement on that. Any questions on blue crab before I move forward?
Ken? Go ahead.
You said stock assessment for blue crab. Don't they use that caddy system?
No, that was older system. We have a sex-specific stock assessment that we put in place in 2016, which Yan Lee, one of our stock assessment biologists, put it together. And so it is a full stock assessment.
What do they use for sampling?
I should know this because I was part of it. Jason.
These are Pamlico Sound, trawl survey, program 195, our juvenile trawl survey. Those are the two main surveys that are used for that. And I think we also use the CMAP survey.
Blue crabs?
No, we have not been to that far.
So due to COVID, that kind of stalled out. We had been, just before COVID came in, we had been talking with Perry about possibly getting one of those surveys started, and then COVID hit and that completely stalled out. So it's still on our list of looking into now that we,
I think it's a gear specific culture. Now, that's the gear that's used to catch it, and using another gear that randomly catches it. Towards establishing a history of hot catches in certain locations and then there.
We weren't gonna get, I was waiting for Ken to. We get to discussion about Ken asking a good question. So I know at the last MFC meeting, so blue crab catches are extremely low, right? And effort is about the same, is that right?
effort's been about the same, and we have seen a decline in catches.
We're seeing fishermen actually ask. in
Yes.
something, yeah, so.
Yes.
I think this, it's fair to say this is gonna be a big issue going forward, potentially.
It potentially, and that is why we, when we did Amendment 3, we put a broader adaptive management in than was in place in Amendment 2. Amendment 2 adaptive management was very prescriptive and very limited in what we were able to do. Amendment 3 opens up what possibilities we have for adaptive management to address any overfished or overfishing status. So when we do the update, depending on what the results are, yes, we may need to put in some adaptive management to, if it goes more, or if it gets better, maybe, no, then we could go the other direction in a magical world.
Interesting, like, I mean, I think most of the states up on the coast seeing a decline in blue crabs as well, so it's not unique to North Carolina by any means.
And Georgia, right?
Get that east wind out of shore.
Yeah, and that's been something we've heard from South Carolina, even from the Gulf, and from Virginia. And it's not something new for invertebrates because even Alaska's not opening their crab season this year.
Well, I mean, I guess I was thinking, mission question, I'm curious to see like what the economics of the fishery are, given there's such an upheaval in crustacean fisheries, like what it is in Alaska. I don't know how, North Carolina blue crab looks like, as opposed to like Maine lobster, Alaskan crab. I'm sure there's a lot of other forces.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I thought it was pretty amazing that and Virginia put in sponge law a lot of it.
I think it's fair to point out there's, a lot of the states up and down the Atlantic coast receive declines across the board. Any more questions on blue crab?
Okay, so returning to our FMP schedule, as Lee pointed out, there were no management changes deemed necessary for river herring. Therefore, at the August meeting, when we opened up the plan, we also wrapped it up. The commission adopted the 2022 annual river herring update as an information update to the fisheries management plan, and that will serve as the 5-year review for that FMP. The hard clam and oyster plan is undergoing a internal review right now on data and the current management of the state. And you'll likely hear more of that in late 2023. So later next year is when we'll open that up for public discussion. Moving on to estuarine striped bass. The advisory committee gave recommendations for estuarine striped bass amendment 2 in March. And then the Marine Fisheries Commission reviewed the amendment, and it went through all of the steps post-review from the AC. And as Lee said, the November business meeting, they will be discussing Amendment 2 again. In the meantime, after continued stock concerns based on a low juvenile abundance in the annual review, the division undertook a stock assessment update for the Albacore Roanoke stock. The division and Wildlife Resources Commission staff continue to work on that update. Due to an initial review of the assessment results, the director did not open the fall season in the Albemarle Sound, and the director continues to assess that subject.
Do we have any updates in the younger year?
It was not good.
Yeah, so the most recent one is spring 2022. Still considered, it was below the line that would be considered. So it wasn't.
It was very unfortunate because river flow was at the perfect
2 years ago.
spot for 2 years in a row, and we have not had recruitment in those 2 years.
We're at about year 6 of not good recruitment. Below average recruitment.
To touch base on that at the commission meeting, I just like to
Yes.
help for the commission committee to hear that
Yes.
for our last meeting.
So next is spotted sea trout. A peer review panel agreed that the spotted sea trout stock assessment is the best available science and is appropriate to base management on. The assessment contained data through 2019 and estimates that the stock is not overfished with the biomass above the target. However, it is experiencing overfishing. A stock assessment overview will be presented to the commission at its November meeting. Yep. So the stock assessment for spotted sea trout, we are not overfished. However, we are overfishing.
How bad?
Jason? You'll get more on that from Leanne. Yeah.
Trying to figure out exactly what needs to be done with that. We're just at the point where we're kind of finalizing the assessment right now.
So we'll have a little bit more in the next couple of weeks on that internally so that we can give the full update at the commission meeting. Yes.
Yeah.
When was that posted? It must have been just
2
recent.
days ago.
There you go. Okay, I feel better for not having seen it yet. All right.
Yeah, it was like
Still
Monday.
locked out of my email. So.
It was Monday it got posted. So yeah, so that's available now for the public. And Before I move on to striped mullet, 'cause that's the last topic on my fisheries management plans, are there any questions on management plans other than mullet? Y'all are usually the talkers.
Right, I'm kind of surprised. I don't even know what to do. Guess we're going into mullet then?
Yes. So striped mullet, the stock assessment was presented to the commission at its May business meeting. The peer-reviewed assessment indicated that the stock is overfished and overfishing is occurring in the terminal year of 2019. Because of stock concerns, the DEQ secretary has determined that it is in the long-term interest of the stock to develop temporary management through a supplement. The supplement will be in place until Amendment 2 is adopted. The supplement will be presented to the commission at its November meeting. Also, at the November meeting, the commission will receive, yes. So right now, so a supplement needs to be temporary action that is simple and effective. And so in order to do that, right now, the supplement includes end of year season closures. And so that will be reviewed by the commission. If they like what they see, it will be reviewed by the public following that meeting. If they want things added to it, we'll have to work on that plan a little bit more, or that supplement a little bit more prior to the public looking at it. However, it pretty much covers the most effective and easiest way to do it is end of year closure. That, go ahead, Dan.
So Jeff and I are the species lead for striped mullet. We'd be happy to answer any questions. We'll let Corinne get through the rest of the run. All right with you, and then we can have a larger discussion about mullet.
And I think it's just to point out the discussion we had at the commission meeting was the supplement would just be like a time closure, right? And I think they're looking, I mean, there wasn't really an option put forward in the discussion. If I remember correctly, it was like November, December sort of thing or something like that, correct?
So the supplement will have some options in it, but yeah, it's basically exactly that. It's a end of year full closure for both recreational and commercial. So and like Dan said, I'll finish this, and some of that conversation will also wrap into our conversation on scoping. So I'll wrap up and then we could get into that a little bit more. Dan and Jeff are way more knowledgeable than I am on it. So also at the November meeting, the commission will be asked to approve the goal and objectives of Amendment 2 and to review public scoping period comments. Public scoping was held September 26th through October 7th. A scoping document was developed by staff to guide conversation and seek input on management strategies to be developed during Amendment 2. Management strategies are techniques to achieve the goal and objectives of a plan. The proposed management strategies for Amendment 2 in the scoping document included sustainable harvest, recreational fisheries management, small mesh gill net management, stop net fishery management, and migration corridors. The division reached out to stakeholders through an online questionnaire and 3 in-person meetings, one of which was held as a hybrid online meeting. That was our first time doing a hybrid meeting for an open forum type meeting, and using our new audio setup, which we're using today. I actually received a lot of feedback from people in person and on our online option of ways to improve that, hopefully. So I appreciate all of that input because Laura and I have been really working together to try to provide ease of access for our diverse stakeholders in North Carolina during this invaluable meeting period for scoping, because we really need to hear from the fishers of what they are looking at, what they see in the fishery, and get ideas from them. So we had over 200 stakeholders participate throughout that 2 weeks. Comments centered on concerns over assessment results, regional management, year-specific management, year-round fishing needs, recreational fisheries, and concern on overfishing of certain life stages. Some of those comments were in different regions, were on different life stages, such as the finger mullet. There was a lot of interest from stakeholders in becoming members, words today, members of our FMP Advisory Committee. I look forward to speaking with all of those people as we move forward in the process. How the process works is once we wrap up the scoping and get our goal and objectives approved by the commission, we draft an entire plan, and then we work with that FMP Advisory Committee to really hone that plan before the commission sees it. And so when we have a better idea of when that workshop between our plan development team and the advisory committee will happen, we will put out a notice for advisors. And at that time, either myself or the leads will give calls mainly to these people who are interested in advisory committee membership to apply. So if anybody is ever interested in being a part of a FMP advisory committee, I'm always available to discuss that and to get people applications when necessary. So that wraps up my stuff for mullet. And as Dan said, we can really discuss however you all want on if you have any ideas or thoughts on any of the management strategies.
So, I mean, do you guys have anything you're presenting or just here to answer questions?
No, I mean, the main reason we're here is we want to hear input from y'all on what you think would be effective forward to end overfishing stuff.
I have a couple of questions. Shut me up if I talk too long. In the previous meeting, there was a lot of frustration by the commercial industry between differences between the 2018 and the 2022 stock assessment. I realized that 2018 was not a benchmark, but it was based on the 2013 benchmark. And the way I look at it, and I'm not nearly as smart as you guys, or I'm not a stock assessment person, but they used the same model, stock synthesis model. And when I went through the two assessments, there were some rather vast differences in both recruitment and in the spawning stock biomass. And I'm sure that you're aware of these figures. And what I was going to ask is that as you present this to be very transparent and be able to show the 2018 SSB estimates, 2018 recruitment estimates, along with 2022 estimates of both spawning stock biomass and recruitment. I'm sure you are aware of, I know that there was, when I read the review, the peer review of the 2022 assessment, they found it suitable for management purposes. But there are some problems within that assessment. And so what I would ask you to consider doing is for transparency to be able to show the differences between the estimates of those spawning stock biomass between the two assessments. And then to try to explain why these differences were so extremely different. I mean, these are very different, as you're aware, I'm sure, if you looked at the figures, and I'd be glad to give you those figures if you are interested. But the models were the same. There was some tweaking of some input data.
That's correct.
But basically the models were the same. But I just found it a little bit concerning that there were such vast differences. I mean, these differences, and I'd be glad to discuss this later with you. I've got some of the differences here, and I do have the figures also. The other question that I have is that in the 2018 assessment, this relates to the stock recruitment relationship, which correct me if I'm wrong, but the stock recruitment relationship, I was not able to find in either of the stock assessments. Is that correct? Did you show the stock recruitment relationship in any of your assessments?
So like you said, we'd be happy to discuss anything about the stock assessment with you later. That assessment was peer reviewed.
So was the original one.
So was the original one,
Correct.
yes. I'm not entirely sure what you're asking about, if we were able to show the stock recruitment relationship. The way that is represented in the model is through the estimate of steepness, which we do have in the report.
Well, let me just give you a quote from the 2008 assessment. For stock recruitment relationship, estimates of a biomass-based reference point were considered unreliable. Therefore, status in relation to the overfish condition is considered unknown. This was in your 2018 stock assessment.
So
Also,
if I might.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sure.
So when we did that assessment, we assumed that there was basically no stock recruit relationship. In this updated assessment, with the more information that we had, we thought that there was actually a little bit of a stronger stock recruit relationship in this model based on the data that we had.
That was 2 years data you had two years extra data. I'm not trying to.
No, I know.
Please,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to.
For sure. Yeah. I completely understand.
I'm just trying to understand this, and perhaps maybe this would be something that the Marine Fish Commission should be able to understand.
I agree. They should be able to understand it, but that might be asking a lot in some cases. It is a complicated model. And it's all of the information is available in the report. The peer review report you mentioned.
I read that, yeah.
The report, yeah. So you read the differences between the two models. I'm sure when you read the 2018 stock assessment report, you read the whole list of problems that the division identified with that model as well. You assuming? Yes.
Well, the thing that bothered me the most was the stock recruitment relationship. And then I just have one couple of more points on discussion of the results. Again, this is getting back to the 2018 assessment. This is a quote: "The reliability of the model results is tied to the reliability of the input data and model performance. A major concern with this assessment, 2018 now, is the lack of contrast and high variances associated with the survey indices and lack of contrast in the commercial landings data. Models require variation in stock size and fishing effort to reliable estimate parameters." And that is cited by Hilborn and Walters. And for those that don't know, they're fairly decent biologists. So it says lack of such contrast leads to parameter uncertainty. And all I'm asking is, not here, but could that be explained to the commission? Will you consider this? And perhaps maybe address this issue? You don't have to address it to me or here.
I will say our resident expert on this stock assessment is Laura Lee. She's not here.
I realize that.
She can speak in depth the details you're asking. This would be a pretty long conversation that.
Right, but I'm just bringing these points up to consider.
Yeah, and she could absolutely discuss that in depth with anyone interested. If anyone was interested, they would just request it from her.
Because I'm just putting myself as a Marine Fish Commission member, and these are the things that I would like to know about.
And I'd just like to point out, the commission did receive a full presentation on that assessment at their May meeting. And so they've already been briefed on all of that assessment. And so that is when we let them know that we'd be initiating the amendment process and all of that. And then also the concerns during that scoping period was a little bit of miscommunication about the target and threshold numbers. So Jeff, you conquered that yesterday.
So, yeah, brought up at the meeting here, the central district area scoping. Folks brought up the fact that the SPR, it was brought up as the threshold was changed, but the target was changed due to the fact that it is an important forage species, and our SPR target and threshold was very narrow. So there wasn't really a lot of built-in cushion in case we got it wrong. So we widened that gap in case
That's understandable.
because of the variability.
Right.
So we didn't really move the threshold goalpost. We did widen them so that we can so that our targets have a better chance of meeting our goals.
Well, it wasn't the first day. Oh,
So.
yeah, but they're moving.
Yeah, so what we use to determine the overfished and overfishing status is the threshold. In the last assessment, that was set at 25%. And the target was moved up to 35%. This assessment, we maintained that threshold level, 25%, which is what we use to determine overfished and overfishing.
It was 20%.
It was 25%.
It was 20%, it moved up.
That's not correct. It was 25% in both of them.
Alan asked a very good question that was, asked at the commission level, and I touched on it. It's just that I think it'd be helpful to understand, for people in this fishery, like what were some of the, let's call it Cliff Notes version, some of the main differences between 2018. Because I think there were some data streams that you didn't incorporate.
And there's some that we expanded. Yeah, the program 915 is the only independent survey used in this stock assessment. Previously, we used 135, which was the Gillnet survey in the Albemarle Sound. And we also used an electrofishing survey in the Neuse River, but it was limited in its area, and it was overlapped by the Gillnet survey. So we eliminated the electrofishing because it was showing the same thing. We were able to expand the Gillnet survey to our southern region to include the New River, which gave us a more expanded view spatially of the stock.
Now, can I just interject here? If I could recollect, when your abundance index for both between the north and the south, I'm thinking of the figure, if I remember the figures, they were somewhat, to me, they were dramatically different. and yet you combine those. So I assume that the stock assessment people found that that was appropriate. But when I looked at it, I said, these look quite different. And the other question, can I ask a couple of more questions? Am I taking up the time or?
Well, let's have, do you mind if, does anybody else have a question?
During the last meeting we had last week, I guess it was brought up about catch and landings. And you folks were able to articulate that landings, the commercial landings are basically are used simply for removals. They're not used to estimate spawning stock biomass. You use your program 915 basically, and you use that, your catch per unit, you have a catch per unit effort, and that's why that's valuable. Well, I look at 2022, two of the figures that you have, and you have all the way back to 1950. You have the commercial and recreational catches were used for abundance indices. Now, in the 2018, for the commercial catch and abundance indices, you go back to 1995. Now, if I recall, it was in 2004 that program 915 came in 2008 for the north, and 2008 for the south. So how could you come up with SSB estimates from 1995 in your 2018 and 1950 for the 2022? Is that something that Laura Lee might answer?
That's a stock assessment question about how that's done in the model. So that would be something for Laura Lee to answer. But we'll also add that in addition to the commercial landings and the recreational landings, the abundance indices that we have from 2004, we also have a lot of biological data. So we have age data and we have length data. We have that length and age data going back to
As well as sex data.
as well as sex data as well and maturity data. So there's a multiple pieces of information in addition to the landings, abundance, and recreational data that are informing the model and the stock and the status of the stock.
Right, I realize you're putting in a yield per recruit, you're putting in your, those types of things into your models, I assume. But I guess it still bothers me that we say that, well, the commercial landings, which it's almost difficult to get any kind of catch per effort from the commercial landings. So
So we didn't do that. We didn't do a catch per effort from the commercial.
No, you can't. I mean, you can't do that, but yet you were able to come up with abundances, spawning stock biomass estimates for that period from back in 1995. And I guess that just is something that I just hope that I'm not trying to be aggravating or whatever, but I just think these are things that I think we should be transparent about and let the commission know these things. I mean,
I think if I might, the reason that, I mean, you're seeing it as a lack of transparency. But what it is these models are very complex.
They are.
Get into the weeds of how every input influences the model. We would basically need to put the entire model equation up there and go through factor by factor and discuss. We have constants that are input into it, and those are based off of previous biological studies, whether it be for this species or species with a similar life history background. So it's not just the inputs that we're getting from the fishery. There's also constants. There's also other factors, and we would need to really go stepwise through every single input on how that affects. And then it's a very complicated and long process. And we'd be happy to discuss it with anyone, but I think if you were to do that at, say, a commission meeting, you're looking at a whole day. I mean, that we have stock assessment.
No, I agree with you. I mean, you have to run these different trials and make sure that you're observed and you're expected, or kind of coming together. I understand that. But I guess the point is that the dramatic differences between the two assessments, it seems to be, to me, that there was some heavy duty tweaking going on. And I think that that's something that's, to me, is a concern. And if I was on the commission, I would be concerned about that. So,
I'll point out that all of our peer review are open to the public, the MFP. Everyone is welcome to our peer review workshops where we sit down and our stock assessment biologists and our leads sit down with the peer review panel and hash out literally every nook and cranny of that peer review. That is the appropriate place for that conversation to be happening. And we do make an effort to be clearly transparent on all of our assessments. However, we do need to also realize, and I think this is what the leads are trying to get across, that it's not as easy to say, this is what went into one, this is what went into the other, boom, it's different, because there's a lot of information in the middle there. And so when you are trying to address the level of understanding of everyone, and that is our job, is to address that level of understanding, it gets difficult. And we appreciate your comments. And I've written down all of them, and it's going to be.
yeah, and I unfortunately I went online and did listen to part of that review, and I've got do have this external peer review report for the assessment for the 2021 stock assessment. So you do have that. And
Is it on this subject, or do you want to keep? Sounded like you're changing tunes.
no, I'm talking about the striped mullet.
No, well, Dr. Buckle has his hand up.
Oh, yeah,
Got a
yeah.
second question? Okay. But I was just,
Please.
want to thank Corinne for bringing that up around the peer review workshops, because your concerns have been raised in the past, and that's one reason I believe that. Appreciate you listening and participating in that, but it's been really good. But if Dr. Buckle, if you're ready to provide a question or comment.
Yeah, Alan, I appreciate you going through the details on the last assessments and comparing. I just wanted to point out that these assessments are, good at getting the fishing rate, but not always good at the biomass. So small changes like in natural mortality can really have a big effect on biomass. But the ratio of the biomass to the target, because the target changes too in that model, because you've got, all right, now the model thinks there's a lot more fish, so the biomass is higher, but the target changes too. So then you look at that, how does that new SSB, that might be double what it was in 2018 or half of what it was in 2018, but that target changes too. So I don't know how the targets, I haven't looked at that in 2018, but for the biologists, I just was curious if natural mortality changed, or if the von Burt parameters changed, or if the histology, was there updated histology, that'll move spawning stock biomass, right? Because if you change from, well, the fish mature at 200 millimeters and then, well, now they mature at 250 millimeters, that'll cut spawning stock biomass in half as well. So there's, as you guys mentioned, there's lots of things that can change it. So I guess that's a question, if there were some changes in some of the life history inputs between 18 and 22. And then a second point is on the sensitivities, to Alan's point, I think Laura would be, I think without too much extra work, she could produce plots of, plus or minus some sensitivities on the von Burt, the growth parameters, sensitivity on the reproduction, maturity parameters, sensitivity on the natural mortality. So you could see how the spawning stock biomass and fishing mortality rates compared or were impacted by, changes in those by fishery inputs. That's done in other assessments, just so you get a sense of what's important to that assessment, and those can guide research recommendations too. But thanks, Alan, for pointing that out.
Thanks, Jeff.
And so to answer your question, Dr. Rockel, I don't recall if there was major changes to natural mortality or any of the growth parameters, but we did update the maturity schedule for striped mullet based on results from a recent maturation, age of maturation study. And that was completed in 2019, I believe.
So that's that. There's a graph in the 22 stock assessment that shows macroscopic ogive, and then a one for the histology, which is those curves are pretty different. Was the macroscopic used in 18?
The macroscopic was used in 18. Yeah, we didn't use that this go around because of the big difference between the macroscopic and the microscopic histology.
Yeah.
Based on, we actually discontinued the macroscopic.
Okay. Yeah, so that may be it, but that would, Laura could do the sensitivity to see if she goes back to the just did a run with the old maturity versus age, it might produce spawning stock biomass values that are similar, change it to something that's in the area of what Alan saw for 2018.
Traveled well down this path, and I hope it was informative. However, I really want to bring us back to why we're here today, and that's to talk about Amendment 2 and possible management to address what the stock assessment said.
And to spur that conversation, I would like to give a little feedback on what we got through scoping. Had some great turnouts here. I think we had 45 or 48 people in person. Some of the main points we heard was that this is not a one-size-fits-all fishery. This is going to need to be assessed. Fishermen in Dare County fish different than fishermen in Carteret County, which is very different from Brunswick. So we've heard different styles, different mesh sizes, different targets, targeted parts of the fishery throughout the year. Dare County bait fishery is king there. They get the most money for a 1 to 1.5 pound mullet. Where down here, the biggest roe fish that you can get is going to fetch the best price. We also heard that there's major support for adaptive management. We've heard repeatedly, once you take it away, we don't get it back. And we understand that. We hear that concern. And we also heard that we don't want to base adaptive management on landings. We want to base it off of something like abundance or stock status or something along those lines, biologically based. So we know that we do want to include that in the stock assessment or in the fishery management plan. We want to work adaptive management into that. We also heard some good input about how the gears changing mesh sizes could affect the size of fish you catch, and that could be a good mechanism for controlling harvest on smaller or larger fish. Generally, we didn't hear a lot about the migration corridors or recreational. We did hear that possibly putting in a minimum mesh size for cast nets. That was just some feedback we heard. We didn't get a lot of detail on how that would work.
I think that covered it.
Yeah. Yeah, we heard about.
You said they were all one stock. Trying to explain to you, I don't think they are one stock. I'm going with one experience and the way I would taught them guy was here and he taught me, he'd be 120 years old now. Got some experience behind him, he taught me. What we see. Thank you. I speak south of Oak Sound. Can't speak for how far down it goes because I primarily fish around that area. Southern Oak Sound. We see two different boats. Okay, it's the Black River mullet, what we call Black River mullet. Soft, supple. Generally runs either the ocean front or a sound. Those fish come through, but fish that we primarily fish on come at random times on ships. And those fish come in, what the old fellows told me, is they come in from offshore. So if they came down from Virginia, they swam out the shoal, down the shelf, and they come back in. How true that is, I can't verify it. Well, I mean, that's what I was. And you can tell those fish, and you can see those fish because they're a bright emerald green as opposed to the cold black river boat. That I can't say it's the same species, and I can't say it's not, but there's something going on there that you need to consider out.
So I do want to acknowledge there's going to be regional differences in behavior of these fish, and some fish are migrating from the tops of the rivers, and some of them are staying in more brackish areas. In terms of the fish coming from offshore, depending on the weather, the fish can move offshore and move back in. We know that happens. We did conduct a tagging study from 1999 to 2002, and that found very limited movement, especially interstate movement.
In the resident fish, I can understand. There's resident fish that stay in the river the whole time. They'll never leave.
Yeah. There's multiple studies, tagging studies that have been conducted from the Gulf, Florida, here, and we've tagged over 14,000 fish in our study alone, and they've all come to the same conclusion that these fish don't really make large migrations, and they tend to stick to where they're from. Don't really move a lot, and there's good support for this being a single stock here.
Has there been any genetic studies?
So I guess 120 years of experience.
I'm not arguing that there wouldn't be different, like, I understand that if a fish is in a different habitat, it could be a different color. I mean, we see that in red drum, we see that in striped bass, we see that in numerous species. And just because that certain fish are living in another area, they're not a separate, it doesn't necessarily mean they're a separate stock. They could be a subpopulation of the same stock. And they could have different behavior and different patterns, but that doesn't mean that they're a separate stock.
The mullets I'm talking about is the emerald green mullets, are real tight body, firm mullets. And that's what dealers want on the counter to sell.
So at 120 years of experience is very valuable, and we would love if you shared your experiences with the fishery for us, because that would help us get a more thorough understanding of the fishery.
What kind of time frame are you talking about here on this? Is this a temporary closure or permanent closure? Or?
So if we did management through a supplement, that's temporary management until amendment 2 is done. So if we do a season closing, then that's implemented through the supplement, and then we flush out all of our management options, and we go through the whole development of amendment 2, and that's adopted. And whatever's chosen is something different than a season closure, then that would replace that season closure. So it could be temporary, but if it's adopted as part of amendment 2, it could continue.
Time frame.
And
so the time frame we'd be looking for a season closure. So in Jeopardy, you know when the mullet fishery occurs. It's October, November. You know that you participate in the fisheries. And that's something we've considered with this.
Time right here, feeding catches, it's up 18%, 19%, some pushing 20%. Fishery government.
But so as a whole fishery, looking at the whole state, most of the landings occur in October, November, and more specifically, they occur from October 15th to November 15th. I've seen some expansion of the fishery into December. Like you've observed, we've observed the same thing.
It's not an expansion, it's just historical way it's been persecuted.
Yeah. And so to get any type of reduction in landings from this fishery, kind of have to cut into that main peak of the season. So it'd be that October, November, and that December period. And so
That's the whole road fishery.
that is the peak of the fishery. Yep.
You're talking about closing the whole road fishery.
Not the whole road fishery, no. What we're looking at is end of the year closures. So depending on what options we have, those would range anywhere from about the beginning of November through the end of the year to about mid-November through.
You're aware that they go by percent. When they go ahead and bring those mullet in, they go by percent of that road to that total weight of that fish. Body mass. They take a sample out in the fish house, and that as that increases, obviously, the price of that fish goes up. So that's something that has to be considered.
Yeah, and so one of the things we heard in Dare County earlier in the week was that really anything that could add fishing days in November would be beneficial to the fishery. Do you all feel the same way? Add fishing days in November. One of the things we heard on Dare County the other day was that any days you could add in November would be a benefit to the fishery because of that row market where you're getting more of the percentage of the row.
Well, you would have to, like I said, because it moves down the shore just like a wave. In other words, they might be catching 17% mullet body mass weight to mullet per row. And Oglethorpe, I'm still at 13 down here, which I don't even mess with because there's not enough there to make the value up. I mean, I'm working the monetary side of it also. So my best bet is to wait till that fish gets to at least the 15 to 16% body mass.
And when do you usually see that happening?
That's late November around Thanksgiving.
So in that area, you wouldn't even be bothering to try to catch roe mullet until the end of November.
The latter part of November.
So
some of the guys will start. They'll start as early as maybe the 8th or 10th of October. But they're catching low row count loads. They're basically going on the fresh market, cheap price.
So it sounds like based on that input, like one of the things that you would be very interested in is regional management to account for those regional differences in fishery.
I don't think, because of the time frame, the time shift. In other words, as they move down the shore, that's as they move through time, they grow heavier in weight by the time they get to me. And I'm at the bottom of the road waiting on them.
I was just gonna say that, to me, that describes something like a season that would close sooner in the north and later in the south. Would that make sense?
I don't see any reason to close have any closure at all, period.
Unfortunately,
Because-
because of the stock assessment results,
because-
we're statutorily bound to having a reduction.
Well, there's other ways to do it, my friend, okay? But what I'm trying to explain to you is while that man's catching dollar mullets up there, I'm looking at 25-cent mullets up here. It ain't worth me going. That's part of your escapement because those fish, when they start moving, they don't stay in one spot. Okay, so I'm waiting on them dollar fish to get down here to me, and these quarter fish, they've already gone on. That's part of the fishery and the way it works.
So what other way do you see?
I'd say a mesh size. If I was saying anything, minimum mesh size to take roe mullet. That doesn't stop a mullet fishery for bait or anything else from occurring.
You think a minimum mesh size so that,
To take roe mullet.
yeah, and so you would be then letting the smaller fish go, but capturing the larger fish.
Sure, you have inch and 5/8, inch 6/8, inch 7/8. If you use 2 inch, all the way up to 2 inch, all those fish, a good portion of them are gonna spawn. The smaller fish are gonna run back up the river and fatten up and pull off the road and then they're never gonna spawn. So the roe is gone. They reconsume it to get through the winter. And those are resident fish. That's why I was saying, the resident fish are there and they never leave. And that's not into your figures.
So would you propose like a seasonal minimum mesh size then to allow for the bait harvest to occur earlier in the year, and then you said just for roe season, institute that minimum mesh size?
Just for roe, that allows the bait fishery to keep on operating.
So you're saying simultaneously?
In other words, if you've got a 2 inch limit or 2 inch mesh limit, take roe mullets. And you go out and you find somebody that's striking mullets with a 7/8 net, and they got roe in them, then that fella has a problem. Otherwise, those 7/8 fish shoot right through that 2 inch mesh, you would never, no harm. But it doesn't stop the bait fishery from operating, which is a major component here. You're gonna have to have bait fishery, you're gonna have to have mullet fishery, and you want any type of fishery that goes with it, you're gonna have to maintain it. You just can't shut it out.
I will say, if you simultaneously have bait fishing and roe fishing, and you have a minimum mesh size for roe,
Correct.
I'm not sure that would be enforceable.
Because there ain't a whole lot of people down this way that bait fish.
I think, going for, first of all, Mr. Tarpley, we're going to get you just a second. He's had his hand up for a while. I'm sure he's got a question, but I think it's going to be important that we have market analysis so we understand this. There's a lot of confusion versus the roe versus the bait fishery, right? It's a big conversation.
Well, you bait fishery and your fresh mullet fishery goes on the counter in the market. Roe fishery cut up and he's on the way to wherever he's going, whether it's Taiwan, Korea, or whatever.
Different prices, different markets. I think that's going to be
completely different.
Do you mind if we go to Mr. Tarpley? He's been waiting for a long time. Bill, if you have a question or comment, go ahead. Thank you for being patient, by the way.
Just a little bit, but you indicated that there was little movement from your tagging data. The fish that were tagged, were they entirely fish on the inside, or was there a percentage of fish tagged in the observed migrating groups of fish offshore?
So I believe the tagging study occurred in internal waters only, but it was throughout the state and throughout the seasons. So the fish that are going to migrate out would have been captured in that pre-spawning run during that period of the tagging program. So I don't believe we ever had people capturing mullet in the ocean for the tagging survey, but that contingent of fish would have been inshore earlier in the year, and we had the tagging study going on throughout the year. So
it would depend on where you tagged them at. If you were in Virginia and you were catching those mullets coming down the shore when they got the overcoat batteries.
That's where I was going with that, is how do you assess the immigration and emigration across north and to, if we've just tagged fish on the inside and we're not getting any recovered tags outside?
So we can't.
Would that not be important in the assessment?
It would be great if Virginia had a tagging survey and South Carolina had.
Well, I can explain to you, I mean, to butt in, excuse me, Mark, but fish that you're tagging on the inside, what size are they? Question. You said you done it earlier in the spring. Earlier.
Year round, Ken, it was year round.
Year round.
Mhm.
Okay. Like I said, those fish are 1.5 inches, 6 8. Those fish go right back up the river anyway, so it's not surprising that you caught them back up the river because there are resident population there.
And some of those fish were recaptured years later. So they would have had time to mature and then make a spawn.
Right.
So they would have migrated at some point.
And now they came back to the same place. Okay, so that.
I mean, this does sound like a. Obviously, this is probably future research.
That's a great point. Yeah, maybe add that into the amendment as a research priority would be a continued tagging study and maybe try to communicate with other states to make it a multi.
As well as making sure we're tagging fish when they're in the ocean. That's for the scientists. to
Can I
figure out.
ask a question real quickly?
Is it?
Do you guys have any data on the percent as far as roe is concerned, up and down the coast? Do you get from the fish house, the percent when, when you bring roe mullet in, they go ahead and they take a sample and they get a percent of the roe weight to the body, to the fish weight? Yeah, so do you have those data, say up and from the north all the way to the south? I don't know whether it would be valuable, but to me, I sure would like to have it if I was.
So we don't get the percentage from the fish house data. What we do get is we get landings like roe mullet, or mixed grade. We get our landings based on the grade, and they'll grade them out as roe mullet.
So you don't get the percent.
The size. We do collect biological samples from like a sample of those commercially landed fish. So, and from those fish, we get, we take the length, the age, the weight, and then we take a weight on the roe as well.
So you do the percentage, yeah,
We could calculate the percentage for percentage of this.
by area. Sure.
Yeah.
That's a great.
Cutting at a proper percentage for the cutters to be purchasing them. I'll dictate the market anyway. Probably have a pretty large.
They'll take 13% fish.
So are you talking about the fish house or the cutters?
Both.
Fish house give them to the cutters, basically. They take a sample and then they give them to the cutters.
A great comment, where I like that it went kind of into an idea for the future of management, right? Like, because that's, and Corinne who brought this up just recently, we had some good discussions about in process. Let's try to provide some good input for the management of this. That was great. That was it. It kind of went in a circle, but it went to a good place. So
As a fisherman, that's my objective, to get the most out of every fish. So when is the best time? The best time might be Saturday night, November the 5th. October the 1st in Oklahoma. That's what you're gonna have to dice out.
And I will say from our independent surveys, we do mullet as a target species and we do bring them back to the lab. We do get a gonad weight. So it's not coming from the commercial fishery, but we are sampling fish throughout the year from all the areas of the state. And when we bring them back, if we catch them, we're bringing them back. We're collecting age samples, length, and we're weighing the gonads. So we're getting that not from the commercial industry, but we are collecting that data from fish in North Carolina throughout the state.
You're gonna need it if you're gonna have even, like I said, I'll say it one more time, if you want a pro season place, You're gonna have to know what percentage of row are in the location that you intend to impact. Each location in section down the code.
Brent Fulcher was here. He could give you a really in-depth how that system operates in the fish house.
Put his name on the FMPAC list, so. That's exactly like, so when we develop these FMPs, that's exactly how we use that advisory committee, so.
Yeah, if we were gonna pursue that, that's the exact insight we would need is the seasonality and how that market operates to make a decision.
Well, do we have any more questions? No. Just stay on agenda. We're a little bit behind. I think we have really good discussions. We can continue going. Right, Molly. Quick question, if there's none, have you guys looked into any climate impacts in this fishery? Like increasing availability in seasons? I mean, we're seeing that in so many of other coastal fisheries.
Haven't really looked at anything specific, climate wise. Anecdotally, what we've heard, at least from some fishermen, I mean, at least to Mr. Siegler, it sounds like December has always been a portion of the business, but in other areas, we've heard that December is becoming a more important part of the fishery. The data
In dollar value.
in dollar, okay, yeah, and even
Might be fewer fish, but
I've seen the season move later and later for
I mean, I would never consider and set 200 yards in depth for 35 fish. When I see 35 fish that weigh 4 pounds apiece, and I know they're 18% roe, I know that's getting up there in dollar dollars. Makes it worth it.
to your point, Tom, we've also looked at storms, obviously, large storms, hurricanes seem to be increasing in frequency, and we do track the abundance in relation to these storms and the market. Years where you have big storms, you tend to see a drop in the market, as well as we tend to see that drop off in mullet in our surveys.
And I'd just like to point out that we haven't looked at anything yet for the amendment. We haven't even started to do the data dive for the amendment of when it comes to like how to do management based on our data and stuff. So things like this are things that we'll be keeping in mind as we move forward with developing the amendment. Because like at this point, we have nothing on paper, and these are all projects that we have done and continue to look at.
This changed. I thought this went up to the secretary, back down to the secretary. Secretary said, "Oh, we need amendment. We need amendment."
The secretary said we need a supplement, and that is the temporary thing that will occur. And it likely will only be 1 year that supplement is in place. What we're here today is to talk about Amendment 2, which we have not begun to put pen on paper yet. And so that supplement is a stopgap until we could get Amendment 2 in place. And Amendment 2 is, we could look at a wider variety of things like gear, like regional things and stuff like that. The supplement is just a short stopgap action. So that'll be very limited in what the Marine Fisheries Commission sees in November. But what we're talking about is the broad scope of what we can do in Amendment 2, which is a lot more options.
Quick question, kind of for Ken, because he's resident mullet fisherman of the day. So I understand the market kind of collapsed during COVID in 2020. Is that true? Like no one's buying.
Why would you want to catch what you can't sell?
So that's my point. So no one was buying in 2020. A lot of times in fisheries, we tend to make like emotional decisions based off of what's going on, this year, last year. Has that market recovered since then? Like, are the roe mullet prices back up?
I don't know. Best I'm hearing, the cash shortage, and it's gonna cost you $50 to crank that 150 up and warm it up, and world's in a worldwide recession, so who knows?
Well, but that's not what we're really asking. So if in 2020 that there wasn't much of a market for roe mullet, right? What about 2021?
There's always a market.
that doesn't really answer, but fair enough. Kind of a big picture.
In other words, am I gonna go out and break my neck all night long for 30, 40 cent millets? No, sir.
So has the price increased for roe mullet since 2020, or is it down?
It's been down since mid-90s. In the mid-90s, I got $2.85 a pound. I mean, one strike make $14,000. So yeah, it's got a lot to do with
Well, what about short term, the last 5 years?
the last 5 years. I haven't been on the water in 2 years.
You need Brad Fulcher here for that, I think.
Parker?
Go ahead, Carl.
You won't get that price until closer to the season actually really hits and opens up. When a cutter comes down here and starts cutting some fish and actually seeing what the road looks like and seeing, you know, what the percentages are, that's where you'll really start finding out what the price is gonna be. Just like Britain has no idea today what that price is gonna be until that cutter shows up, you know, they're sitting in there and they're cutting fish and they see what it actually looks like. Visual aspect of it means a lot to the cutters and what they're doing. So it's hard to say what the price is going to be, you know, for this year coming up.
What about last year? We've heard these comments that like 2020, there wasn't much of a market, but what about 2021? I mean, if no one can answer that question.
So if you look at our annual update that we discussed earlier, there is a figure that looks at the weight that was landed. And 2021 was what I would call significantly higher than 2015 through 2020. It's significantly higher.
Question, is that roe mullet or is that fresh mullet?
That is the weight in pounds of commercial landings of the one that I'm looking at. However, I am sure that there is another graph somewhere that we will, or if it's not in here, it's something. Was there that one in scoping document?
Alan can break it down for you into red.
Yeah, it's stuff we'll look at, but I'm just to address what Tom was asking. 2021 landings for weight wise for commercial were significantly higher than the 5 years before that.
That's my knowledge, the X vessel value was higher.
So I'm going to do one last call for comments before we move. Something like to add, management wise, questions?
I just want to point out, I don't want anybody to run out and do a large tagging study on striped mullet. I was looking back and there was a large effort by DMF in 97 to 2001, a 4-year period where they tagged 15,000 striped mullet, both inside and on the, and out in the sounds, you know, closer to the inlets. I'm not sure about on the beaches. It looks like that from the paper, but there's a 2005 paper that summarizes that data. It shows the southern movements when you'd expect it, and then northern movements when you expect the fish to come back. So there are some data out there in a 2005 paper.
I think they tagged a bunch in Bogan and Core Sound, so closer to the ocean. I don't know if that was part of the stop net but they did get some out either in the ocean or close to the ocean.
Yeah, that's what the figure looks like. Looks like there's some tagging bubbles out on the ocean side.
Jim Francisconi was. Lee and I were hired, I think at the time that study was ongoing. Plants that
Might have been part of Don Bickey and I think Rich Wong.
Rich Wong, yeah, but Rich Wong was after Jim, but Jim kind of had waited, started it.
Back to the mesh size thing. You take a 2-inch mullet, it's gonna be 2 pounds, it's gonna be 25 fish. Wow. He's cutting 16, 17%. You can just about be really sure that majority of roads gonna be right in the 6-ounce range. size of the road standards also. Because that's what, it's not just a percentage of road to the fish body mass weight, but it's also the size. So you might have two 2-ounce rows. You might have four 4-ounce rows. You might have 8 6-ounce rows. You might have over here, you might have left 10 12-ounce rows. Well, the 10 12-ounce rows is where the money's at.
I think it's a good time to move on the agenda.
Yeah, I mean, if you're ready.
Let's go.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, no, the only thing left is, agenda items for next meeting, so.
should we do a call for public comment real quick?
Well, we can.
We can. Is there anybody here? What about anybody online? Is there anyone listening?
Oh, we don't have a public online.
No public, okay, all right, fair
It's
enough.
Streaming on YouTube.
Okay, just had to do the formality. There we go. We'll go ahead, let's do the planned agenda items for next meeting.
I know in January, I believe they have the stock assessment. Stock assessments. Input or anything that you think, fair game?
So it's to give kind of an overview of what information stock assessment gives to us and to you all and to the FMPs when we do them. So it's more of a high level overview of what the language means, what they look at, how they work, the currency that they're in, those kind of things. So it's an educational opportunity. And then if there are things that, like the conversation that we had today, we can move into bigger questions like that. But it's really meant to, because in January there will be new advisors and everything, and Laura's really looking for these educational opportunities so that everyone feels that they have that tool in their toolbox when making decisions.
And that January meeting is a virtual meeting.
Correct. Or currently it is planned for a virtual meeting.
But that's helpful. I'm glad you guys are doing that. That's helpful stuff for advisors. It's
Mhm.
complicated stuff.
Yeah.
It should be mandatory.
So if there's other things that people want to know about, that like our programs that we do, our sampling programs, or some FMP thing, or like anything that you feel would give you a tool in your toolbox to bring to a meeting. And then Laura also, if there's stakeholder concerns that you have, that you would like discussed, that you think that that then should be brought to the Marine Fisheries Commission. Laura said to let her know if any of that comes to mind, such as if you have false albacore stuff, or if, I don't know, what would Kat say? If you would like some management on inshore lizardfish. Please no. But yeah, so anything that you think is a concern from industry or people you know, or recreationally, and you feel that the committee needs to talk about it and then bring it to them. I see Laura's always available for you all to bring that to her, and then she can talk to and bring it to the committees.
I would highly advise that. Or
Oh, and on that note, Laura had been telling the last two groups that she had been trying to do emails to keep advisory committees abreast of what's been going on at the commission level and at, within the division and things like that. She has gone a long time now without having an admin. And so that has fallen off her capabilities at the moment. However, thankfully she she has an admin starting soon. And we're all happy to hear that because it has taken a village and she has been very grateful to Hope and Debbie stepping in to assist. And so soon you'll get to hear from the admin from the MFC group as well. But Laura plans to start that again in 2023, where she keeps those email communications open as well to just keep that flow of information for everybody.
Well, we always miss Laura when she's not here.
Yeah,
You guys
and she
have done-
apologized for not being here today. She had to be in Raleigh. And we apologize for butchering her.
You guys have done an admirable job and we all appreciate it.
I did blue crab for my master's.
Oh, did you?
And blue crab
We're
ingress.
here for a few minutes, but
It's larval ingress.
Where you was,
I was at, down